everybody, and welcome. I am delighted to be joined today by John Turner. John is the Chief Executive of Link Group, and Aspen were thrilled to be selected by the board of Link during the recruitment process to find a successor to the previous Chief Executive, who was there, I think, for 35 years. Is that right, John?
I think so. I think it was 44 years, Nigel, in total.
Oh my God, really? So it was a big decision for the board, obviously, and for the organisation. John's obviously had 4 years now in the RSL sector, 2 years in his current role as Chief Executive of Link Group, and 2 years previously in a senior capacity in finance with Wheatley Group. So today's it's really interesting to get your perspective on the housing sector. I know you were involved in banking before, John, heavily related to the RSL sector, but now having taken up the reins at one of the leading RSLs in Scotland, just talk about a wee bit about the industry since you found it as Chief Executive in the last couple of years since you've been in post, and what maybe changes have happened during that time and what changes are maybe still to come.
Well, thank you, Nigel. It's been, yes, as you say, 2 years since I joined, and probably a game of two halves, I think it's probably fair to say, the year before the pandemic and the year following the pandemic. And I think that if you look at it purely from that perspective, our sector, like so many others, has changed enormously in terms of reacting to what we've been forced to face into. And I think in a very, very positive way as well. And if I look back on the first year that I was here, big focus was beginning to come into the sector on sustainability. So how do you get the social impact of what we've always done as a sector, which we hold to be completely precious to us? How do you begin to prove to other people that this really matters and it changes people's lives? And how do you evidence that? And how do you continue to embed that in all the decision-making processes? And I think across the sector in Scotland, RSL's made huge progress on that. As we've been going along, and you're beginning to see the fruits of that with some of the sustainability type funding in particular that people down in England are raising and will undoubtedly come through in Scotland. I think alongside that there was huge activity running, and still is, in the development world. So Link was not alone in having a significant development programme. We've got about 2,500 new homes that will come live in the next 18, 24 months. That have obviously been a big part of the Scottish Government's drive for homes. And that will continue, and that's fantastic because there's simply a shortage of affordable housing in Scotland. These new homes coming out, again, transform people's lives and the families that get those homes. So that's been hugely powerful, and I think that really anchors the sector well in terms of how we sit in the social fabric of the country itself. And I think that's why, if I look at the second part of my tenure in the pandemic year, it's why housing has been so resilient. But what it has done, it's probably jumped us forward 5, possibly 10 years in terms of how we work and the changes we've been forced. I guarantee, back in March last year, if I had said to everyone, right, everybody out of the office for 2 weeks, see if you can work from home, you'd have been laughed out of the office. It would have never happened. But in 2 weeks, that's what we did, and that's what RSLs across Scotland managed to do, and it's a phenomenal achievement. Yeah. You look at the service standards that have also been maintained across Scotland, that people were able to do that, and the infrastructure existed to support some of those changes. So I think it's setting us really, really well for the next 3 to 4 to 5 years. These changes forced onto us will allow us to make massive steps forward in flexible working, in flexible contact with tenants. These types of areas we were catching up on, but if you compare us to commercial sectors that do this routinely, we weren't really that close to knowing how to do it. And the last 12 months have taught us a huge amount about what works, and candidly as well, what doesn't work quite often.
Indeed. Yeah, thanks,
two different parts.
Yeah. You talked about sustainability, and I'm aware that Link have a very extensive, development programme, and obviously the success of new build development across the sector has been heavily supported, by Scottish Government with the HAG grant. and the continuation of that. Do you know now what the Scottish Government are going to do? Are they going to continue with a similar type of grant funding, for continued development, or do you think that might change?
Yes, the Scottish Government have been very proactive, and with SFHA as well. We've done a lot of work to sort of emphasise the continued importance of that programme continuing for two reasons, really. Firstly, the homes themselves are of critical importance to communities across Scotland, but also the RSL sector, because of the scale of what we've been developing, have built a very strong experience and specialist knowledge base in the development of new homes in Scotland. And it provides a huge amount of employability to communities across Scotland. So the combination of these two things helps both with the economic impact of the work we do, the social impact of the homes, but the other side to it is also that, like a lot of organisations in the RSL sector, it's not just about the homes, but we, in our contracts, we also look for partners in the developer world who come and contribute more than just the homes, be it through apprenticeship schemes, be it through other community benefits that they bring as part of the development contracts. And the Scottish Government recognise that. We'll certainly see a continuity of the HAG grant programs that have been running for the last 5 years. And it's something we've welcomed because it gives you the continuity, it gives you the ability to look forward and keep the development program running. And it's one of the strengths in Scotland we've got is complete cross-party support for housing at that Scottish Government level. And it takes some of the uncertainty in terms of upcoming elections and this type of thing to know that all the political parties are very much in the same space in terms of huge support for the sector. That then translates through to that type of grant support. Great.
You mentioned we've all lived through or living through continually since last March COVID, and the impact that has had on everybody, some worse than others, of course, from a health perspective. But we've had to change our businesses dramatically. The tenant, your customer, is at the centre of everything that Link do, the same as most RSLs. And because of the changes of working remotely and advancing your digital offering, how are you changing the services delivered to your customer that's been enhanced, due to the COVID, sort of lockdown?
I think it's a good question, Nigel, and I think there is a question as to whether it genuinely has been enhanced yet. What we've done, like many people, is switch off a lot of the face-to-face services. So as we sit in the lockdown today, you're pretty restricted in terms of what you can do in the communities we would normally be in. But we've been helped by the Scottish Government's absolutely clear guidance all the way along that housing, tenancy, antisocial behaviour work has all been considered essential services all the way through. So we've been able to move to a blended model where when you need to be out and supporting people, you have the right to be out and do that work, which has been a really important part of supporting the most vulnerable communities and people in society where you need to get out and you need to see them face to face. So that's continued all the way through. But what we have done is enhance our contact with customers, be it by phone, be it by text, be it by emails. Social media channels have had a significant boost this year.
Yeah.
What we need to do, though, is we need to now use next year to go back to our tenants and the customers and say, has this worked for you? So we've changed because we've had to. We think it worked, and we're getting some fairly positive feedback to that effect. But what I want to run in Link next year is a significant customer engagement program that goes to actually test which of these channels worked best for tenants. Because it's all very well me saying, right, brilliant, I'm using phones and all these different mechanisms to get information out. It's equally important now, though, that you complete the loop by finding out what works on the other side. And as I say, we've had really positive feedback, but I think there's now time for a very structured engagement to go and check how these feel when you're a tenant on the other side. I've no doubt that this time next year, if we were having this conversation, some of the channels we use at the moment might have been switched off, and others might have passed further as we get the two-way conversation going.
Great. John, thank you so much for taking the time to join me today. That's been really interesting insight, from someone that's leading, the sector, and obviously still got a very major development programme with 2,500 new social houses, which is, I think, probably one of the biggest development programme of any housing developer throughout Scotland, actually, including the private sector. So, well done, and more power to your elbow, sir, for the future, of Link, and thank you for taking the time to join us today. We'll speak again soon.
Very welcome, Nigel. Good to speak to you.
Thank you.